Yeah, they kind of chuckled and laughed. Hey, Mike, how are you?
Good.
Good to see you.
Hey, Mike.
He left me a voicemail. I'm like 30 seconds from starting.
Here you go. Thank you. Here you go.
All right. Let's call this meeting of the village board to order. We'll start off with a pledge of allegiance, please. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call. Trustee Long. Here. Trustee Con. Here. Trustee Goodman. Here. Clerk Kellner.
Here.
President White here. Planner Sensky is here. Trustee Renner. Here. Trustee Clark.
Here.
Trustee Hutchins.
Here.
And all of the department heads, both chiefs. Carla is excused, she's ill, and Eric said he'd try and stop and get in here. Move along to item number 2, public comments. Any public comments, please try and keep them to 2 minutes or less. If there are no public comments, we'll move along to reports. Item 3A, Fire Department monthly report. Chief, how's the knee?
It's coming.
Good.
So we had 12 health calls this month, and Assistant Chief Sonnenberg's been working very hard to get that COVID vaccine, working with the county and everything, to get it to all the people that want it. Everybody should have received some type of email from him on that. And so hopefully that'll get through to anybody that needs it now, and get that going.
Good.
So,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Review library monthly report. Carla is ill tonight, so you will find her report in your packet. Peruse it at your leisure. Move along to item 3C, Police Department monthly report. Chief.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening, Chief.
Drive safe. Slow down. And don't forget your crash. All right, reports are in front of you. 5 drug-related offenses, 2 OWIs, 1 disorderly conduct, 3 others withdrawal warrants, 11 total adult arrests, 84 traffic stops, 71 citations, 5 non-traffic citations, 318 total calls, 131 business, house, and extra patrol checks, 2 traffic accidents, 5 EMS calls. You can take a look at gander at the rest of that stuff while I keep going. Or actually, I'll talk about it for a minute. I highlighted some things that might of interest, I think. From time to time, there might be comments or things said about what goes on in here, what doesn't go on in here. You'll look and see the felon that is on parole in our village, that lived in our village, which we recently arrested. The sex offender that we arrested for a violation of the sex offender rule. To a person for methamphetamines in our village was a felon, which was 2 felons that we arrested on that day. So just to keep all that in mind. 8 hours and 6 minutes, assisting other agencies, 110 initial appearance letters went out for the court, 21 pretrial letters went out for the court. For the village of Waukesha, just 8 initial appearances, state debt collections at the bottom there. Trustees, Rudy Shaw, I sent him the information that he requested last month for stats for 2019 and some additional information about duties of the police department.
Thank you.
And things that go on besides the normal patrol that nobody realizes. If anybody else is interested in that or wants to look at it, you can either get it from Tony or I can forward it to you from the email. Questions, comments, concerns, gripes?
I think we might be missing a page. You have one that's front and back, correct?
Yes.
I
I
think
did not make the copies. Should have three.
I don't know, I'm there.
We all got ours. We're just trying to hide information from you, Tony.
Let me see here. What's your for a sec. You're missing a page. I think everybody's missing a page.
No, I got mine.
Gotta make it up this one.
Oh, Larry doesn't have his either. And a copier.
Yeah, Chief, thank you very much for the information you sent. That was very helpful.
Okay. All right, any other questions? Could you send me anything? I will send it to you. Yep.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, chief. Move along to item 3D, president's report. No report this evening on my end. Item 3E, Public Works Department monthly report. Hi, Eric.
Good evening.
How's it going out there?
What's going on?
Thank you for taking time for us.
How bad are the roads?
What's that?
How bad are the roads?
You're better now.
It might be on the other side.
Other side.
It might be on the other side of the stem.
All right. We had 4 stakings and burials at the cemetery. We sold 5 plots this month. We did all the right-of-way stuff. Obviously, took out the Christmas tree, the lights off of that. Ice at the DPW and the firehouse, number 2, is, it was pretty dangerous. We had some 8, 9, 10-foot icicles, anywhere from 3 to 10 inches in diameter. So we went out and took all those down. We picked up all the Christmas trees in the village, probably the largest Christmas trees we've ever picked up. The Whistler report, which is a maintenance report for the state, which none of you actually get to see or anything like that, but that was completed and sent in. We had a rather large funeral at the row home. We ended up sending the driveway over there, American flag up on top of here. The pole here got ripped down with the wind. We ripped the hasp right off, so we replaced all those. We removed 6 problem trees over on Lynn. We've been out 6 times in January. I think we're doing pretty good on salt. Obviously, we haven't had a whole, we've had snow, but we haven't had a go through it very much. Took our first load actually on the 2nd. That's pretty much it for right now. Any questions?
Last meeting you mentioned we may be paying storage fees for salt. Do you anticipate that in the future, or?
I don't want to use the salt just to use it.
I understand it. I mean,
No, but yes, if they don't, I think there's going to be some issues, just the fact that so many municipalities are going to have an excess of salt. Either that or you're going to see the cleanest roads in the county, you know, because everybody's going to be trying to burn that up, but that's a lot of salt. And remember, our salt also, our MS4 program that nobody think here fully understands, but we have to submit how much salt we use each year to the DNR. So it goes by snowfall and everything else, and yes, we did put down heavy salt here tonight because all of you people here are out walking around and just scraped it and stuff, and the temperature is dropping, so there's more salt here than usual. But I also like to keep a residual on here in case the wind takes the stuff off the roof, blows it on the sidewalk around here, something like that, so nobody slips and falls. Any complaints or issues on the snow plowing issues?
I haven't heard any.
Okay.
The loader is very quiet except for the backup.
Yeah.
That's the only comment that's
you
happening.
can sneak by going forward, but once you back up.
It's there for a reason.
Yeah, it is.
For
It's
safety.
a safety mechanism.
So, all right, thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Good job, Ed.
Item 3F, report from professional services. The attorney had just left me a voicemail. I'm assuming he's not going to make it due to the weather. So we will move along. Item 4, consideration and approval of minutes. Approval of the December 3rd, 2020 village board meeting minutes.
Yeah, right, that's missed, yeah, it's not right. Can you resend?
Let me re-say that. Consideration and approval of minutes from the January 7th, 2021 village board meeting.
I'll make a motion to dispense with the reading.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
second line on the underlined section, trustee Clark advised that I think it should be the instead of she.
Page 1 under the fire department, second paragraph, person who's asked on the calls for service, should it be service, it should be on.
Where was that again?
First page, fire department monthly report, second paragraph, first sentence.
Right above that, it should be that he gave his report, he advised.
Third page, number 5, approval of bills, Trustee Goodman moved to approve.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's all I got.
I make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 5, approval of bills. Discussion, consideration, and approval of bills from February 4th, 2021 in the amount of $74,387.81. 74387.81.
I'll make a motion to approve bills in that amount.
I'll second it. Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 6, old business. A, discussion, consideration, and possible action on the emergency management plan for the village of Big Bend. Update. Trustee Huddy-Shell.
Yes, sir. We are on track right now to hopefully be able to present the proposed emergency management plan to the village at the next meeting for comments. My question is this thing would have to go to public comment.
You mean hold a public hearing?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's something we'll have to run past the attorney, I suppose. Would
Yeah,
you
I
know?
don't know offhand.
I don't know the answer to that either. The steps that we have to take, we would take it back to the Public Safety Commission first, and then we would look for public comment if we need to, definitely board comment. Then I need to take it from there to the emergency management for Waukesha County for their perusal. So it looks like the time frame on this should be, we're going to be able to go through the process of refining it next meeting, next month in March. And then it's should be able to be finalized and voted upon during the April meeting and have it ratified in.
Very good.
We've got all the information back from the departments. Public Works is need to work with Eric just a little bit. Obviously, he's a little occupied with the weather right now, but we're almost there, and everything else is in place.
Outstanding. Nice work. Thank you.
We're getting there.
Anybody have any questions? Moving along. Item 7, new business. A, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding adopting Chapter 16 zoning code.
No other real highlights to continue with from earlier discussion. The question was raised, what happened with stormwater management? If you look at your section in the code itself, section 1608, at the very end of section 1608, you'll see that the erosion control and stormwater management element of the zoning code was completely taken out of this code and is now all covered in chapter 13.
to go back to my question is, on the R4 high density single family, with the sewer requirement, you're looking at an awful small lot there. And I would like to see that removed. When we get sewer, we can revisit this, but right now I'd like to see that taken out of there. That is way too small of a lot for a community like ours. I know there's some in the inner part of the village, but you know, they've been here a long time and that was approved back then. Now we're a very rural community. People move out here because they like the open space. I don't think that, this is my personal opinion, I don't think they want to move out here and be in a setting like what they would be in Milwaukee or West Dallas or something like that. Not criticizing those communities because they have a large population, but I would like to see it no less than a half acre. What is, let's see, is the next one a half acre? R3? Is that a half acre?
Roughly, a little less.
Yeah.
The other important piece to note is there is nothing zoned R4 right now.
No, nothing's
So
zoned.
even though it's in here, nothing is zoned that way. So it's not like all of a sudden these parcels need to be rezoned.
And even at R3, you know, I'd like to see that go to half an acre. That's not much land either.
So the Harvest View that was on the drawings, what is that templated out for?
I actually believe that that is the piece that precipitated the discussion about the R4 district to begin with. I think the question was multifamily or single family there. But in any case, what's it slated for? That brings up a great point. The very next thing that has to happen is the zoning map needs to be amended. Once you adopt a new zoning code and you've adjusted your districts, now you need to go directly to the zoning map and talk about where you now want to place all of these districts. For the most part, they'll line up nicely with the way it's already laid out. But like that splitting of the B3, B4 now to be something much different, where they used to be much about the same, we'll be looking a little harder at that.
So what happens, I mean, you say that, but what happens to the people that own that land? Like they're just forced into that?
Well, no, it's the subject of a public hearing. It's the subject of a public hearing. But they are going to have, you know, right now Harvest View shows up on the map as, I believe that's an R2.
Yeah, it's 1 acre.
Yeah, so they're not gonna be impacted too much. You know, that R2 is very likely gonna, the recommendation will be to keep the R2 right on there. Right? But people who own, I think if I have, for instance, where we might change something. The prospective change that was being discussed is where you see the gray.
I thought the gray was heavy industrial.
Right, but there was conversation about changing a portion of that to multifamily residential. And
When was that?
that was back in the time of the TIF district discussions.
Like years ago?
Yeah, I would say at least a couple of years ago.
That section of land behind Pickles you're talking about, back in there, we gave, that one developer smaller lots at that time, but half acre lots, I think, or less, but we weren't, if we had sewer.
That wasn't.
But I don't think we, again, I agree with Jeff, I don't think we ought to create any new lots that are half acre or less. There is a few lots around this village that are existing, probably non-conforming, and I don't think we ought to restrict them because it's in a potential future to be built on a few of them. But I don't think we ought to create any new half, or, you know, small lots.
Yeah, the only other thing go ahead.
I think you're right. I think the thought of the R4 was to, along 164, for all the smaller lots that we already have, said they would be likely that people would hook up to the sewer. That's what it was designed for. It wasn't like we're gonna carve out new areas to develop. It was to rezone those properties to say, hey, you're now tapping into sewer, so you can be part of R4. It wasn't to carve out an
Well, I
area.
guess, what does it matter if they're already there, they're already established, why do you have to create
Yeah, that was,
a zoning for them?
yeah.
I think,
that was
again, this
years
goes
ago.
back
It was
a
good.
while.
And going back a ways too, when they put the sewer line in, there was not a requirement for people to
Correct.
tap into that line.
It was optional, correct.
And is that still true?
Yeah, I mean, it's
There's
still
no
a pipe in the
requirement.
ground, so it does nothing at this point.
Right.
The idea, though, was that with an R4 district, in certain areas where there could be an extension of sewer to vacant lands, that we want to be able to maximize the number of connections in order to get the best return.
The flow, the flow they needed in order to sustain the system.
Right, right.
So you are thinking that you would put R4 somewhere in that space, then?
Not
I don't
there.
think we bother now.
No, not
I don't
anymore.
think we put
So
R4
if you
anywhere.
if you rezone the houses that are already there that qualify for R4, you're forcing them to hook up?
No, those zoning can't,
It
doesn't
doesn't
relate
mean, one
to.
doesn't mean the other.
So
Kelly
what's
said
the-
there's nothing in our.
No,
There's
discussion.
nothing, it is empty, nothing's been labeled R4.
The discussion in the past and the hope was, once there was development up on the interchange up there, that would be enough to sustain the flow they needed to sustain a sewage treatment plant.
Correct.
In addition, they were anticipating that even just the school
Would be a hookup.
tapping into it would be enough to justify it.
Yep. No, you guys are mixing things those are two separate things.
Okay.
So there has been no discussion anymore about that sewer requirement, and it's not tied to this. This was before my time on planning, this R4 thing. So that shows you how long ago it was.
I was here for those discussions. I wasn't a
Yep.
trustee at the time, I was
Yep.
just a citizen.
Yep.
But I would want to reiterate that there was no requirement.
Correct.
Once there is a sewer system here, if that ever happens,
Yep.
that there is no requirement, if I live on 164 or 2 blocks down, that I'm required.
Again, that has nothing to do with zoning, right? That's the implementation of the sewer. that needs
So
to be
I'm
done.
not, what I'm not understanding is the purpose of having an R4 or including that in here, if we don't have it, we're not anticipating putting it on the map, why would we address it in here?
There might have been a vision in the past.
It doesn't apply.
Yeah, before, well, any of us in this room were on the planning commission. And, yeah, I don't think that vision's there to develop those small lots. Sewer's still down the road a little ways, and we could put sewer in without having an R4 district.
Yeah.
You can't put an R4 district in though without sewer.
Right. A
So,
prerequisite to placing that zoning on any property is that it be sewered.
But if we have an R4, it makes it enticing for people to want to change to an R4 now that it's dictated and it's there.
it would make it enticing for a developer to develop an R4 once we had sewer in.
Right.
Right now,
But right now, we don't have anything rated there. What I heard from Mike and Jeff is that they don't want that size lot, that they would prefer half-acre lots at a minimum. R4 is not on, it's not in the village right now.
How close is that R3, how close is that to a half acre? It's gotta be pretty close.
R3, 20,000 square feet, 43,560 is an acre.
I have it up right here.
About 1,500.
It's just under half.
Pretty close.
It is 0.459 of an acre.
It's real close.
So I could go with that. I would just really like to see that R4 totally taken out. When we get sewer, we can readdress it, if we want to readdress it. Those are such small lots. I just can't see us having that here.
I'm totally fine with that. I don't see a problem with striking out. Again, it's not being used.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Are you making a motion?
I'll make that motion to,
Well, we're not done.
Is there any more discussion?
okay,
Let's wait.
yeah.
So I would like to know the changes on the setback. What was per industrial Are all the setbacks the same as they were before?
Yes. The changes to the setbacks and offsets to the residential districts,
That's what changed?
was made before this code. It was adopted before this update.
Is there anything where if, on that map, you have industrial abutting residence, i.e. Badger Meadow, what is the setback if it's industrial abutting a residential?
It's the more restrictive of the two. So it's going to be, in a case where the red meets up to the gray, for instance, where the red meets up to the yellow, on a side lot line, it's going to be 20 feet. Double check my,
For the business, for that.
double check my industrial.
The industrial could be within 20 feet.
20 feet's
Well,
not that
industrial.
far.
No, it's not.
Especially where you don't have any buffers in between the two. Where it goes from heavy industrial to residential.
Well, because that's, my understanding is that yellow is residential,
15 feet, I'm sorry.
and the gray is heavy industrial, and you have heavy industrial abutting to residential
Yes.
on that map.
Correct. So in a case like that, those are side lot lines, so only that side lot line distance matters. Along the street front, only the side lot lines are accounted for in a case like that, where they're side to side with each other.
So-
If it's across the street, industrial has a 50-foot building setback. So they're gonna be further back, like for instance along Guthrie, those buildings would be set back a little further, but I don't disagree, again, I recall that this all came up as a part of business park discussions, and the desire to be able to really be able to maximize, use of the land, and on the presumption that there would be sewer there. Now, should there be a provision in the code about a greater offset requirement from disparate zoning districts? I think that would be a great idea, yeah.
Is that what you've seen other communities do?
Well, other communities don't usually have quite such a small offset requirement for industrial.
I mean, my problem is where the yellow on that map meets that gray, which is your like Badger Meadow, your Harvest View, that kind of thing, is right in someone's backyard, which is 20 feet. You have a little kid that's 20 feet from a semi, from a building where they have loading, unloading docks, things like that. 20 feet is nothing. That kid can be gone like that.
I think we need a bigger setback, and I think we need some kind of buffer zone to take the divide.
Can you address buffers? Like, can you?
Absolutely. You put it in it's kind of a supplemental section of the zoning code, where it talks about like averaging your offsets if you're on a legal non-conforming lot, for instance. There's all kinds of exceptions in the supplemental regulations. And you could simply say that where a business district abuts a residential district, or an industrial district abuts a residential district, the side yard separation has to be at least whatever you guys want to put in there.
I would imagine the easiest thing is to go with 35, right? Instead of leaving that at 20.
The residence is
Is
going to
35
hold 20 themselves, so the building will be, the residential district buildings will be at least 20 feet off their lot lines.
And then 55, and I'd rather 55.
Right.
So, we addressed some of this in planning. We talked specifically about that particular two lots coming together, the scenario on that. And part of it was that you have to really get into some mixed language to try to associate with the proper buffering between like heavy industrial and residential. it was more so, if I remember correctly, we brought it back down to saying that the ultimate businesses, industrial, that would be on the backside of those residential lots would have to come through planning so that we could adjust as necessary to make sure that there's proper buffering.
Right,
And then it
but that,
wouldn't be something like a busy loading dock in somebody's backyard where there's going to be, you know, like a distribution center, I think is what I brought up. Because that is one of the industrial zone uses that could be there, which means 24-hour truck traffic 20 feet into somebody's backyard.
Correct.
So,
Which means that you have backup lights,
Right.
backup
I mean,
signs.
it's gonna become problematic whenever those two lots, you know,
But I think that's
And how it's
part of
zoned.
what this is for though, right? Is to protect us and to protect our community and what we're wanting. So why wouldn't you address that now?
well, I asked the same thing back when we were in planning. And I was told that it was more so that on each individual case-by-case basis, it would have to be addressed through planning to make sure that there's proper buffering, trees, berms, whatever needs to be put in place so that there's not going to be noise issue with somebody, you know, facing lights in a parking lot, whatever else it might be, including safety of the families that are living there. So I'm just saying that's where we were in planning.
Yep.
Kelly,
No, that's right. I mean, you gotta set a tone, but every scenario is gonna be a little bit different depending on what type of business site plan of operation is gonna be. So that's why you get that flexibility to then attack it via landscaping and the overall plan of operations to knuckle down based on what type of business it's gonna be.
I don't think you can go with, you know, with a 50-foot setback and a 50-foot offset, and you got a 2-acre minimum lot. I mean, with 200 feet of frontage, you're eating up half their frontage. Where they're supposed to build, where they're supposed to, you know, we can't handcuff the business either, which is why I think, you know, planning decided to go, you know, with their judgment and recommend to the board, you know, what the site plan of operations is going to look like.
And Gary just told us that the setbacks that we have are very minimal compared to other communities.
for industrial,
I think that's very important for us to note, especially since that industrial abuts residential.
Right, well, there's a difference between setback and offset. One's front to back, one's side to side, correct?
yes. The setback is strictly between the front of the building and the street side lot lines. It's a corner lot, it's got two, other lots, it's got one. The offset is the side lot lines in the rear. I
We
just
can
wanted
add
to,
something to the rear then, to make it further away.
and the sides,
Or do the sides and the rear have to be tied together?
what you could simply say is, in the case of an industrial zone property development, abutting directly upon a residentially zoned or used property. Because remember, sometimes we have properties that are not zoned residential, but they're used that way, and they're entitled to stay that way as long as they want. So in the event you abut directly, that the side and rear lot line offsets will be X, whatever number you decide to put in.
You
It
know,
will be not less than.
Tony brought up the lights. If you have a building and you have lights on, which most of them do, you're gonna, I mean, 20 feet is not much. You're right there.
Wanted to just clarify something that Tony had talked about, that the planning commission discussed, and that is that we do have control through site plan of operations approval when it's in a conditional use grant. We can require a greater setback and a greater offset if it's deemed necessary to make the project viable.
And everything goes through a conditional use grant.
But everything doesn't go through. But the point that was made is that the onerous types of uses for the industrial district are all in the conditional use category. And the not so onerous type uses are the uses by right. So the presumption was, but, so we can't, without a change, we can't force them to put their building more than 20 feet away if they're a use by right, okay? But we can invoke the buffering screening provision of the site plan regulations in the zoning code, which does say that the planning commission can require buffering and screening. So that's just a visual separation. That we can require of an industrial, certainly that would butt up to residential, for instance. In fact, we're just going through that right now on a project where they're butting up to residential. It's not in the village necessarily, but it's residential nonetheless. So the discussion about how to screen that is before.
I think maybe we ought to send it back to planning. They know what we want, they can pull out some of it and fix some of it and bring it back.
If those are your principal concerns, I mean, if you have others, it'd be nice to bring it all back to them.
Are there any other questions?
Any more comments, questions?
I guess, some of it is might be more for Jason, because I think he does more of the enforcement of conditional use. I think if you look around our village, you see some houses that are pretty junky, and does that fall into your category to do something there?
We can't go around and tell people that your fence is falling down, so basically unless a complaint is,
No, but like vehicles, junk.
Yeah, I mean-
Stuff that wouldn't really may not be, residential.
generally between the chief and myself, it's gotta go off of a complaint generally to get the ball rolling. We don't, it's tough to drive around and say, get rid of that skid loader, or, you got too much of this over here, too much of that, because a lot of people, it's temporary, but temporary goes on for a year when they're doing their projects or whatever,
And you could drive down 164 and see a junkyard.
or you could drive anywhere and see.
Yeah, and you see houses that have their insulation or tieback on, and they're not even complete with their siding.
Right.
There's gotta be some kind of regulations on that. You see other ones that just,
Is there a timeline?
Well, the length of your permits, but if all of a sudden, like I said, we usually go after them with like a complaint or some type of action, a written letter. I just don't, we don't drive around and just all of a sudden go, boy, this place looks really run down, to start the inspection process on that, so that helps you.
Most communities do property maintenance enforcement on a by complaint basis. Unless-
Broken windows, deteriorating roofs, a lot of it's like abandonment. All of a sudden you'll see, somebody will always call and be like, hey, I'm seeing raccoons or squirrels coming out of the gable end of the roof, and then we'll get going, and usually between the police department or public works or myself, there's enough eyes going around that's how we usually go after that type of stuff.
I think part of the question is, do you feel like you have enough code to rely on to be able to enforce everything that's out there?
I would say, for what we have set up, I was just digging into it recently because I got a little problem going on, but everything's pretty much covered from our ordinance with, shrubbery to rubbish to, automobiles. We got, obviously we got one of those ongoing, but I don't see any loopholes that we're digging around on that we can't get something to, where we can say, hey, you're in violation of this, and it's a no-brainer.
So I think we're getting plenty of complaints about a couple of places anyway. And I think some of the concern is they're very nervous about retaliation, because it may not stay as a confidential complaint.
Okay. Yeah, generally, I always like to we're trying to implement where we do a written letter, so then we can make copies of that. I can copy the chief or whatever, or Eric, or, then everybody knows. Then you can record that I sent a letter to them on, this date. You give them the 30-day warning, and then if we implement fines or whatever, most people follow through. Some people are just they don't care. So,
I think it really comes down to you and the chief as far as taking care of it, because Eric has no authority.
right, yeah, Eric is just basically for the eyes, where he'll be like, hey, what's going on over here, something like that, where he'll call me and just say, hey, check out over here, I don't know what they're doing, do they have a permit or whatever, and so we're in relations, but I know Chief and I had right over here a rubbish problem where, in fact, Chief took care of it because he had a deputy knock on the door and he knew people were there, but, and then they ended up getting rid of the excessive couches and whatever else was out there, so.
Well, I think one thing that you're trying to bring up is that all of us have gotten an email from residents in regards to the flag with profanity on it and signs in the yard. And I think right now would be a great time to address what we can and cannot do. With both,
But that's not an ordinance, there's
That's the
law.
state's, yeah, we've already gotten a
We've already had
communication
that
from the attorney on that, our hands are up 100%.
but I think that's important to state, that there is nothing that we can do.
It's in the chapter 16 sign ordinance.
Right, so address that now.
You can address it.
Do you want me to read it?
No, say that we can't do anything about it.
Isn't that what constitutes sent to the board?
I've replied to all the parties with that exact, state statute quoted from the attorney.
Yep.
It just
And this
doesn't.
is not something that we can
Nope.
fix within our code, this
Nothing to
is,
do with us, it's all state and those.
And the US Supreme Court,
There have been municipalities that have their hands stopped because they did do something.
And the chief addressed it at last meeting, I think he had some pretty good words on that, saying, the more you go knock on a door and draw attention to it, the more likely they are to put a second sign or a third sign out. Because now they realize they're getting reactions.
So whenever we had spoke about that at the last meeting, we had also spoke about the political signs. The standalone political signs, nothing to do with the flags on several businesses and residential sites. And I believe that you had mentioned that we really can't regulate even political signs, to say that, like the new statutes is 2 days after the election, they need to come down, they need to be put away. And you had said that there was something where we may not even be able to enforce that. And I think that maybe it would be good to address that before we try to ratify that into our new codes, if we need to try to adjust that section. I know that's something we talked about last time, and Mary, I don't think that was brought up.
It is addressed in the new sign code.
Yeah, it is addressed, but what I'm saying is that even that new language, Attorney Scholler said at the last meeting, that we may not even be able to have that language in there about political signs.
Okay.
Because it's a matter of, I don't know, Attorney Scholler, maybe you can kind of enlighten us again on that, but.
well, I'd have to see the draft of the sign ordinance. I know Mary and I talked about it a while ago, and I think you were using something that Mark Woman
Yep,
worked on or whatever,
exactly.
and that, and Mark
Exactly.
researched. So,
Do you not have a copy of the whole ordinance? Would have thought
one
maybe
may
we
have
would
come
get
over,
this.
Mike might have had it, I don't have it myself, but,
Okay. I assumed that you get the packets for these board meetings, or for the whole,
yeah, I have plan commission agenda.
and plan commission, okay.
And part of the
I will
conversation.
send a full set of this over to you tomorrow.
Okay,
Yeah.
no,
Part of that conversation had basically stemmed off of the issue that we have with the offensive flags that are flying. And we had, I had addressed that to try to bring it to see if they would be considered political. And especially because it was, months after the actual physical election, and our old laws that, the ones that are still on right now state, I believe, 7 days, and now we're limiting that down to 2. But Attorney Schover, you had made mention that we may not even be able to have that language in there on
Well,
political
sign-
signs,
yeah,
on
signs-
limitations of when they could be put out.
the signs have to be content neutral, and so we can regulate commercial signs and that. I didn't specifically yet look at if it's a yard sign in the date of the election or whatever, that type of thing, but if somebody has a billboard saying, so-and-so's the best guy who ever served, or I'm in favor of this guy, that's free speech stuff. That's stuff you can't touch.
What if he has 20 of those signs in his yard?
This code will address
And then
that.
the amount of signage we can address, not the content.
Can you address the, like, it
Well,
says that you
as
can have
long as you
temporary
treat them all the
signs?
same.
Right.
Says that you
Yeah.
can have temporary signs, but what is temporary?
Yeah,
It's defined in here.
yeah, what we're saying is that consider it a blank slate, that it's the sign, and you can regulate that. You can't regulate what's on that sign, unless it's commercial.
So the question I asked last time was leftover political signs stating whomever your candidate may have been for an election back in November, if in January we could enforce it to have them remove those signs physically from their front property lines, either if it's a business or a residential. And you had stated something to the effect that you don't believe that we would be able to do that because of some ruling someplace that was about political. And I wanted to make sure that we addressed it before we tried to put chapter 16 in.
Well, yeah, if you had a sign that said pancake breakfast on the same sign, and if you were gonna take that down too, and ban those within a certain time frame or period of time, as long as you treat them all the same, you'd have a lot more ability to regulate that than if you say it's political.
Yeah, but we
Clearly,
have it spelled out in one of the sections in chapter 16 specifically for political signs.
Right. The Supreme Court doesn't care much about the Big Bend ordinance.
Kind of address that too. I think we talked about this at planning, was that there's a difference between a political sign for an election that says re-elect
Yeah.
Trustee Howdy Shell,
Mhm.
as opposed to a sign that just says Howdy Shell,
Yeah.
Howdy Shell 2020 or whatever. We're not an election sign now. Now I'm just showing my support for it.
Now it's an opinion sign.
Right.
I believe is exactly what you said. My concern is before we put code 6, the whole chapter in, we need to address that to make sure that we have the language correct on political signs so that we don't get ourselves into a wrangle down the road.
Well, because this says that signs are, like, you can have a banner that's temporary, which is kind of what I would see happening on 164, is 3 big banners. And it says that they would be temporary, and a temporary sign is no more than 14 days.
You get a variety of different types of temporary signs that are allowed. There's rummage sale signs that are allowed in residential districts. There's,
I'm talking about the one that's like, I hate DPW, essentially. That sign, to me, is a banner, so it would be allowed for 14 days.
which sign are you
Right.
talking about?
The
Right
sign
here.
that's right down the road here.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Yeah,
what
it's a
we've
temporary
heard
sign.
is that that's freedom of speech, we can't do anything about it, but this says we can.
This new ordinance says you can.
Right.
But what we're saying is that the attorney has told us that we can't, because it's freedom of speech.
I think,
So if that's the case, then this isn't right.
He is saying you can't attack it because of what's on it, but you can generally, as long as you apply the rule saying a temporary sign's only allowed 14 days, no matter what's on it,
No matter what's the sign.
then you can enforce that.
what this
Generally.
one says about miscellaneous temporary signs in residentially zoned areas, they're permitted, provided no person, blah, blah, blah.
What section
The
is
maximum
this?
time limit, this is 16, 18,
10,
11.
11, yeah.
for the exemptions.
Mhm.
What I was looking at was 16, 18, 10,
And it's under,
number 7.
and it's under number 2, subpart A.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitions.
And then
1611 exemptions. 1J. Miscellaneous temporary signs in residentially zoned areas.
Yeah.
The maximum time limit for such temporary signs to be displayed in residentially zoned areas with each date that any one sign is displayed, counting as one day, shall not exceed 30 cumulative days in a one-year period. Not more than 4 temporary signs may be displayed simultaneously on any one residentially zoned property. And these signs shall be 6 square feet or less in area, 7 feet or less in height, and shall not be electrically illuminated. Okay? So that's what it says about signs in residential districts.
And is there anything that says political?
Yes.
There's a separate section
Okay.
that talks about political, and that section
Okay.
says, during the period of time, so the following temporary signs shall also be exempted from section 1618, which is the permitting requirement above. During the period of time that's described in the Wisconsin statutes 1204 as the election campaign period, plus 2 days thereafter, so 2 days after as well. So election campaign period is defined in the statutes, and it starts before the election, runs up until the end of the election, and I'm saying plus 2 days after that, okay? When an election or voting matter is scheduled to be conducted in the village of Big Bend on any matter whatsoever, all properties in the village shall be permitted up to 1 additional temporary sign display per voting item. Okay, so sometimes there's a school district member, sometimes there's a village president, sometimes there's a trustee. Every one of those is an item. So you may have a sign for each one of the votes that are on the docket for that campaign period. And subcategorized items, like I was just saying. So if the vote is for the village president and trustees, you get multiple signs. I think you get the idea. In the B1 and B2, B1, B2, B3, B4, you get a certain provision. In the residential districts, you get up to 1 such sign, 1 political campaign sign, per street frontage, not to exceed 6 square feet in area and 4 feet in height. They shall not be electrically illuminated. In lieu of individual signs for each of the allocated voting items, you may utilize the total square footage that would otherwise be allowed under the individuals and group that square footage into a single larger sign. Okay? So if you have, what I'm saying is that basically here you get 6 square feet in area, 4 feet in height, per item on the ballot. Okay? Per item on that election docket. If you have a particular candidate who you are especially wanting
Passionate
to
about.
promote, you can take 6 feet from, if there are 4 items on the docket, you're gonna get 36 square feet, okay? You can either use it 6 square feet for each of the voting items, or you can use all 36 for one guy or girl, whatever you prefer to do. But that's what it says. So they must be removed by the end of the 2 days following the campaign period.
And what's the time period beforehand?
I'm not sure what
I
it
think it was
is,
said
I think it's maybe 90 days.
when the campaign
No,
period
it
starts
wasn't that
before an
big.
election.
Wasn't that quick?
Campaign period, actually would be from my nomination papers.
Okay.
Forward,
I don't think they're that long.
or filing.
I can
I think you
look
read it
real
in there
quick
somewhere.
with stats 1204.
So I guess my question remains, is it something that we can have in our regulations that's not going to embattle itself with either state or federal codes or Supreme Court opinions to say that you have to take down election signs 48 hours after the actual election?
One thing I want to clarify though is, does this say in addition to?
The other temporary signs.
Yeah,
Yes, so this
So-
does not draw down off of your other temporary sign
Yeah.
permissions.
those could be political.
Yes,
The other-
absolutely can be political.
Yeah, so the other ones you allow can be political.
Up to
Yep.
30 days,
But if you've
correct?
already burned up your
That's 30
permissions
days.
for temporary signs, you can't.
So then if it kicks under 30 days, after 30 days of that sign being up continuously, I would presume after an election, plus the 2 days, 32 days total, can we then enforce taking down an election-oriented sign?
Let's say you could take down a sign.
Okay.
When you say election
Generalize
oriented,
Any sign.
content neutral is what I'm getting at, yes. Any sign, yeah. So if it's for the bake sale or fish fry or
You can have
Or
it for 30
politics.
days, that's it.
So then, at that point, it would not be considered an election or political sign, it would just be a sign.
Yeah, what I was searching for is the picture I took of the corner of Greenfield Avenue and Springdale Road and, or Barker, I should say, Barker and Greenfield.
The hill.
Yeah,
I think
the
it
hill.
has all those signs
Yeah,
up.
City of New Berlin doesn't allow those because they want to, at least in my opinion. They allow them because they have to. It is a billboard for us on the side of the hill.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know the location.
You drive by it often.
And New Berlin's got deeper pockets than we do and has chosen not to
You can't find it.
wage, I had it too, I can't,
Okay, what about some of this where we require permitting for some of these larger signs?
Yep, we do require a sign permit.
And what is so what requires a sign permit?
All signs. The only exemptions are listed under section,
Do we have a sign permit? Like, if I come in and tell you I
I've
have,
never seen one, but
I wanna-
there may be something in the computer.
What are the exemptions? I'm sure it's
I've
probably.
seen sign permits. Jason, we have a sign permit application.
yeah,
So generally with the sign permits, they always come back to you guys because you gotta okay the content of them. You know, of what's gonna be on there. We give them how big they can be and, you know, what Mary just read off. But then it comes to, you know, a board meeting that you guys okay. You know, a lot of times they'll come and present what they're gonna do, but more than likely it's for a sandwich shop or a gas station or bar or
well,
something.
let me put this by you. Coming up on the agenda is the topic of taking out a loan for the purchase of like a jumbotron sign
Okay.
that we would, that celebrations would want to advertise. Would that sign be allowed? It's 16 feet by 9 feet. It is illuminated.
it's,
Would that be allowed with this code?
I would have to take a look at, every time, it's on base by base, whatever they submit, then I go into our most recent code and go through all the criteria to make sure that it meets our sign code.
Ninja,
Yeah.
Oh, I know exactly where this is.
yeah, those are all.
First of all, it's in the right of way, so it wouldn't be permitted in the right of way, but we've always, you know, I don't know how much discussion we wanna have about this, because the village has always kind of taken an easy approach to some of those things. I was just saying that,
Well, we probably haven't had things like this come up so much either.
yeah. So in the right of way, there is no zoning
Right.
to apply, but if it were parked, for instance, on an adjoining property,
Where would it be parked for?
For the last 9 years, it has sat in the cul-de-sac by Citizens Bank in the right-of-way, along with a diesel-powered generator.
and the village has.
And they've approved it every year going up to now.
What I'm just asking for is,
I know.
like, we gotta make sure that if you're gonna make this purchase and that's what you're wanting to do with it, that it fits within the code. But I think this sign thing seems to be really controversial. And
Well, it's
I think
really
we
easy
have
when
to-
you boil it down. You can't regulate signs based on content.
Correct.
So it's just a whiteboard out there.
No matter what.
How large, how small?
But can we limit against profanity?
No.
No.
Well, if we did permitting, and it has to come before the board to be approved, we could exempt or not require a permit fee for political signs or whatever it might be. But if we had a sign that came up that had, you know, you said, Jason, we could, you know, say yes or no to the content of the language on it.
I didn't say that.
No?
No. That's kind of what everybody's talking about. Like, obviously everybody's kind of talking about the same problem that we know we all have. And we all dug into it. The only thing that I kind of talked, and I know Warren and I went back, Chief, Mary, and we all went to the attorney, is if you could get a complaint possibly, that would probably be, and maybe I'm wrong, but I just know that we kind of, everybody looked at different angles on how to go after it, and it came from what we all came up with. There's really nothing you can do.
Well, we do have complaints.
We have multiple complaints, I mean, that's
But-
why that whole topic has been brought up to look into.
I think the way it's written, it's gotta be like a neighbor complaint, like next door neighbor.
No. Is there a permit issued for that freestanding sign?
Over here?
Yeah.
No, God, no.
And it's
Because
not
it's a
more than
structure.
30 days.
We require a building permit for every structure.
Right, but we, remember, we talked about this like 3 months ago or 4 months ago when that thing went up, and we all kind of were like, what do we wanna do with this? And we all kind of, then we
Well,
started,
it's not the sign that we'd be enforcing on, it would be the structure without a permit that we'd be enforcing.
We can enforce the signage though, because he's beyond the 30 days for a temporary sign.
Well, do we, that's, this
That's
is,
new code.
that, yeah, this is,
That's
we're not
new code.
adopted to it, our old code didn't have it in there, so that's why
so
nobody,
you're saying a
So I said
structure,
Into its 30,
like-
once this is
cause
approved.
it's,
right, cause we
Like,
had,
it looks like
we had
it's
really
actually
nothing to
all holes.
stick to.
Yeah,
You're
those
considering
things
that
are
as a
fixed into
structure?
the ground, that, to me, that meets the definition, our definition of structure in our code.
I thought it was just on 4x4s with some cinder blocks weighting it down, but
I thought so too, I thought it had like.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I didn't look
I
at it
never
that
went
closely.
close enough to it. because-
With the snow now, I don't know whether you'd see it.
But has anybody even talked to these two people? Or are we just assuming if we do, we're gonna create more problems? We're just guessing. Has anybody
Have you spoken with anybody yet, chief?
After last meeting, I thought we decided that that would probably be a bad idea. Kelly's very aware of the one person who we've had other incidents with, even in the village hall here.
Mm-hmm.
That'd be like putting gasoline on a fire.
So just because I'm a hothead, you're gonna look the other way?
So
I didn't say
so
that.
tell me
I was
the
told by the
difference.
attorney there's no violation.
the flag can have profanity on it, but if I'm outside swearing in my front yard, I can get in trouble for that? As a
If you're-
disorderly
if
conduct?
If you're not causing disturbance, you can't. Now, if you're outside in your front yard swearing and causing a disturbance to other people, then you can get cited for disorderly conduct. Now, if I'm stopping you on the street and it's me and you on the street and you're saying profanity just to me as a law enforcement officer, I can't even charge you with disorderly conduct for that. You have to cause
Okay.
a disorderly conduct, you have to have an outside person disturbed in order to write the ticket.
So I could put up 100 flags in my yard today with F-bombs on it, and you can't do nothing.
That's my understanding based on the conversations that
So,
we've.
could you put up 100
It depends.
American flags? Or 100, it to me is, don't count what's on the flag. I mean, there are regulations against pornography, for instance.
And the complaints that have come through have been from parents of kids that have cited.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I drive by, I can't make up a flag. But I can see the signs.
I'm looking for
I
one,
think-
I just like,
The-
can I see
the-
it, can I not see it?
The specific case from 1971, 50 years ago, was forward, F the trash. That was publicized, and they signed it again. The Supreme Court said, no, that's, you might not like it, it's vulgar, but it's not obscene. By the court's definition, the court may be more liberal than I go, but that said, yeah, I realize it might not be,
We can regulate quantity, size, duration.
But not content.
But not content.
No
And that's what
content.
we have to focus on.
So
is those three.
forget about what any sign in the village says, whether it's Trump, Biden,
Sign's been up too long,
DPW,
it's too
who
big.
cares?
Sign's been up too long, it's too big.
If this
With
is
the new-
adopted,
With the new code.
Right.
this is not in there right now.
Part
The
of that,
structure thing could be,
I think it's temporary.
even if it's temporary,
A little past temporary.
yeah,
Well-
I can look at the applicability of a sign ordinance with whether or not that somehow gets grandfathered in or not. I mean, a little bit different of the issue.
Yeah.
One other point, just to clarify too, Gary and I had talked about the sign ordinance, and I know where it came from and who reviewed it, and that review was done after the most recent Supreme Court cases, about 3 or 4 years ago, I believe that was. And I have every reason to believe that the legal drafting that went into that is accurate. So that was why I asked whether the political definition was in addition to the other ones, because the other ones still apply to everything, in my opinion.
Correct.
So not to continue to hash this, but my final question on it is the language that we have under election-oriented signs states that it has to come down 2 days after the election. At that point, do they just, if somebody keeps it up, does that just naturally orientate itself into a general temporary sign that would give them an additional 30 days?
If they don't max out on the temporary signs, I guess, that they'd allow, then they, I think, get another 30 days if that's their expression of,
Right.
I had them for the person, even though it's passed. But I think 30 days applies then across the board to
Yeah.
all of
what's
them,
on, it's just
whether they're below the limit or above.
Yeah.
If they have enough other temporary signs already up, then they couldn't keep it.
So
passed.
based on what you're saying is, if I could put my signs up for 30 days, I could take them down for 1 day and put them up again.
No, it's 30 days
Not
in
that-
one week.
It's cumulative for a year. Now, I had a question on political signs versus the 30 days. If you have a primary election and you're getting primaried in February, you're not gonna go out and take your signs down 2 days after that election, wait 3 weeks and put them back up.
The election isn't done,
The primary's done.
Yeah,
but then it opens up to the general.
I understand, I'm
Right.
I'm trying to clarify this whole
No,
30
That's a
day.
good question. I think I take the position that
It's
a sign.
reality was it's like this lasts
And
forever.
it's a sign for the second event. So,
This campaigning starts immediately after the first.
yeah, so that rather than take it down and put it back up, I mean, I wouldn't see an issue technically maybe.
It's a continuance of the campaign period, basically.
that would be.
Yeah, I thought you said, John, that you could put up the signs as soon as you filed the papers.
That we'd have to check on what the start point is, but it said during the campaign period, I thought.
Yeah.
Some-
It says campaign period.
So that would be during your filing until 2 days after.
Yeah, and I can be, that's the statutory, it sounds like, so I can try to find that.
Right. We've been banging this drum pretty long and hard.
Yeah.
So what do we want to do?
Well, does anybody have any more questions on chapter 16 or any more comments? We've done the signs, we've done the R4 setbacks and offsets.
Well, I like the buffer thing that Mary talked about.
Which one?
The,
Commercial versus residential.
right,
No,
Sure, a supplemental standard
Yes.
that pushes them 35 feet out.
well, whatever planning commission would decide, I think we should look at what other municipalities have, so we're not a standalone.
Yep.
And then again, if there's anything that we can put in there to make sure that, you know, from a, like a barrier kind of thing.
Buffer zone.
Yep, that's in there. That's in the site plan review regulations.
And then the update to that table.
Yes.
Now, if we kick this back down to planning, that's another public hearing, correct?
No,
No?
no, these are tweaks,
Okay.
adjustments to
Just
this
making
code.
sure nothing major, then
Yeah, if you were really gonna blow it up, I would say we're probably looking at another public hearing.
I'm just trying to get a sense of timeline here because I have one particular phone call.
Yeah, I know,
Yep.
yeah.
I mean, is there anything else, or do we make the change here? Or it needs to go back to planning? Does it have to go back to
Do they
planning?
have to go back to planning?
It should, you know, it's good form to give a refer back to them with the changes you're suggesting.
Okay.
And,
Consider that done.
yeah.
So your motion.
Is that a motion?
That was my motion.
I'll second that motion.
I think we've discussed it by debate. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
And again, not to belabor anything, but to answer a question, that campaign period starts at the time you could circulate papers. So not even filing, but when you could start
Oh,
circulating.
wow.
That's the campaign period.
Thank you.
Under 12.04.
All right. You have the changes noted for, thanks.
You got all in there?
We'll move on to item 7B.
I'm gonna send you all this.
Discussion, consideration, and possible approval of Chapter 13, Construction Site Erosion, Sediment Control, and Post-Construction Stormwater Management and Illicit Stormwater Discharge Ordinance. You have the completely revised and ready to go Chapter 13 in your packet. This was pretty much copied almost verbatim off of the DNRs. The DNR has already approved this. It is due in their hands before the end of March as part of our MS4 permit. I think our biggest changes were just grammatical, typographical, and then updating appendixes A and B to reflect the correct contact information for ordinance control and enforcement and discharge enforcement.
Planning reviewed it and says it's good to go.
Planning said it was good to go and recommended it to the village board.
So there were no concerns at the public hearing.
There were no concerns, no comments, no
No attendance.
presence.
I will make a motion to pass chapter 13, the stormwater management.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? I will chime in that both village engineers reviewed this as well as Commissioner/Trustee Howdy Shell, and they all gave it the thumbs up.
Looking good.
So I'll call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7C, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding ordinance 2021-01, president and trustee wages. 2 pages. Ordinance 2021-01, an ordinance amending section 1.14 of the municipal code of the Village of Big Bend relating to changing the salary of the village board members in the Village of Big Bend. The village board of the Village of Big Bend do ordain as follows: Section 1.14 of the municipal code of the Village of Big Bend is amended as follows. 1.14, salaries of village board members. The village president and trustees of the Village of Big Bend, made by a 3/4 vote of all of the members of the village board, determined that an annual salary be paid the president and trustees. Salaries heretofore established shall remain until changed by ordinance and shall not be increased or diminished during their terms of office. Subsection 1, the following elected appointed officers shall be paid the salaries for their terms of office as hereinafter provided in full compensation for their services as such officers. Sub A, trustees, commencing the third Tuesday in April 2021, for trustees elected the first Tuesday in April 2021, and commencing the third Tuesday in April 2022, for trustees elected the first Tuesday in April 2022. The salary for trustees shall be $2,700 per year. Sub B, village president, commencing the third Tuesday in April 2021, the salary for the village president shall be $4,000 per year. Sub C, commission and committee members, non-elected members of the various village commissions and committees should be paid a stipend in the amount of $10 for each meeting they attend, having business with their appointed position. However, this stipend shall not exceed $200 per appointed official per calendar year. Members of the library board and cemetery board will be paid under these same terms from these entities' restricted funds. Section 2, all ordinances or parts of ordinances contravening or inconsistent with provisions of this ordinance are hereby repealed. Section 3, this ordinance shall be in full force and take effect from and after its passage and publication as required by law, passed and approved this day of 2021.
I think I'd like to make a comment about this. This is really not a raise to the village board or the president, or it's returning the president and the trustees back to where the previous board was prior to this board taking some actions and trying to get the debt and the budget under control. And by us doing that, we led the way as a board to cut ours by basically a third to lead the way. So now after I feel we've done a great job of turning things around, it is time to bring these wages back to where they previously were.
Well said.
So with that, unless there's any other comments, I'll make the motion to approve ordinance number 2021-01.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Yes, sir.
Yeah, this ordinance was initially prepared last fall or submitted last fall. What I was curious about, and we were talking about was another matter about political signs and stuff. What I was wondering is how close to an election you can approve this and still have it be applicable to this term. And I did find something where it says about the changing salaries during the terms. It does say here that the compensation for an elective office shall be established before the earliest time for filing nomination papers for the office. After that date, no change shall be made in the compensation for the office that applies to the term for which the deadline applies. That seems to me that it would set these dates back 1 year each in terms of that in effect people have to know what the salary is when they take out the paper according to that.
Sure. Yeah, it would set the trustees back 1 year and the president back 2.
Yeah, I just noticed this with regard to, up until, I don't know when the nomination papers initially come out, December or?
Yeah, they have to be turned in by January 5th this year.
So probably December when you start that. Yeah, sorry.
So we gotta change the dates?
Yeah.
What's the law with state code?
Of this, 61.193.
61.193?
Yeah, .193 under the villages.
Oh, that's under village, not state.
Yeah, well, no, I'm sorry. It's under the state statutes regarding villages. So chapter 61 is villages, and 61.193 sub 2. And the only exception is if it was, what does it say? Yeah, like in a newly incorporated village, then you could set at the beginning when people are first starting, but that doesn't apply to us, obviously. But, I think the soonest we can implement it is actually in April of 2022.
So then I'll amend my motion to have it go in effect.
Suggest maybe tabling it till next month and let them redraft the ordinance and we can pass
Well,
it then.
Yeah, and I mean, it's pretty black and white. but-
Yeah, we got a whole,
There's no rush.
we got a whole year.
Yeah,
Well,
I didn't even,
8 months, 9 months.
well, probably better than having paid everybody for a year and then realizing.
So we retract the motion
It wasn't.
Yeah, just
and then
motion,
we have a
motion
motion
to
to
table.
Page, I did not see that before.
So Jeff, you made the motion to table, I will second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion tabled. Topic tabled. Item 7D, discussion, consideration, and possible action regarding replacing Ed Bushman as the weed commissioner. He retired, as you all know, he retired from the planning commission. Ellen Cole, I think would be a good fit with her expertise in gardening and plants and available time.
Should we approach?
I contacted her and she said she would be thrilled.
What does this person do?
Ellen Cole?
No.
No,
The weed commissioner.
they are in charge, it is actually a sworn oath office within a village. And they have to manage and take care of all the noxious weeds. Either they tell you to get rid of them, or they get rid of them for you and then we have to pay.
So Ellen will come to cut them down herself?
You can,
Does she
but
have
then the village has to pay her a salary to do so. And I think we can go back and especially assess the,
We can, like, that empty lot beside me when, before it was built on, the weeds and stuff were out of control. The weed commissioner went out, gave him a warning, gave him, I don't know, it was 30 days, whatever it might have been. And then he said, during that, after that time period, the village was gonna come and mow it, and then we put it on the taxes. At whatever rate.
So the village, meaning the weed commissioner comes and mows it, or
No,
Eric?
DPW.
well, the weed commissioner arranges for it to be taken care of, whether she does it herself or hires outside staff or whatever.
Yeah, in this case, DPW came in,
Right.
brush cutters and mowers, and just started maintaining it.
But she has quite a bit of extensive knowledge in noxious weeds, and she set some plans for some surrounding communities on that. And she shared with me some of the paperwork that she's had over the years. She's definitely qualified.
I agree that she has a background in there.
Yeah.
Has she ever had any weed issues in her own yard? So we're aware of.
He's pretty picky on it.
You know, she comes up here and weeds the flower beds for free, so.
Well, I just wanna make sure that we're not hiring someone that would have their own issues in their own yard and making sure.
And I don't want to get too deep into this one either, but noxious weeds have a definition in the state statute, and they're like delineated, and they're that.
Right, yeah, there's only 3 or 4 of them.
Yeah, and that's really it, so.
She can't regulate dandelions.
Yeah, what you and I think are weeds, unless they're
I believe
creeping jenny and thistle and maybe, but yeah, it's pretty limited.
she knows what they are.
Yeah,
But part of that is the height of the grass can, that she can say it has to be cut. Yes,
Not a weed commissioner.
yeah,
That's a
because
building inspector, I
That's just
believe.
a complaint to.
That's a complaint, that's, yeah. The weed commissioner's duties are spelled out by state statute, and we have no say over it. Like I said, it's a sworn oath of office that she has to take.
I thought that went to the weed commissioner, either way it got cut.
Yeah.
I make a motion to appoint Ellen as the weed commissioner.
I'll second that motion.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Welcome aboard, Ellen. Sorry. Item 7E, discussion, consideration, and possible action for approval of Celebrations loan from Citizens Bank. I guess I can start this out. Celebrations Committee once had been renting a Jumbotron that you're all familiar with, that's set out here in the cul-de-sac. They roll their advertisers on that, and then they take it down to the track the day of the event and show video on it. They were paying $2,500 a week to rent that in the past. They're $25,000 into rentals, and they want to buy their own. Newer, better, with the ability to use it for other various events in the village, as well as to have the ability to rent it out to other service organizations, clubs, and events decided.
I think the other big thing was that we're changing pullers, which means that the weekly rental that they looked into would be $10,000 per week.
Right.
And how long do we have it for normally?
A week to 10 days.
So you're looking at 10,000 plus grand per year to rent now because of the polling change.
We got a discounted rental from the previous organization we were partnered with. This is a high def unit, it's 16 foot by 9 foot, it's got, I believe, a 6 foot telescoping and rotating mast on it. It has a generator on board on the trailer that is self-powered if you want it to be, or you can plug it into 220 volt AC. Has all the software and computing stuff with it.
I think the other important part about this was that originally they had talked about storing it behind DPW. They have since found an indoor storage place that they could place this. It does come with warranty. One thing that finance had talked about was making sure that they would look into the insurance for it, so they had looked into it, but they did not specifically ask if we're not storing it on premise here. Is there a concern with that? Because it's being stored elsewhere off-site. We also would have the opportunity to rent this out to other communities, things like that, to help pay it back, and to help put money into celebrations.
What was the total cost?
50,000 is what
Roughly
they're asking.
$50,000.
So they do have money to, cover this in their account, but they're asking the village to take a loan for the $50,000. Because obviously it's a committee through the village, so it has to be a village loan, that they would then be responsible for paying.
I think we could set it up so it was auto-paid right out of Celebrations account. If we get the loan through Citizens, which I think we all agree we go with.
For those of you that weren't here in the past, the village previously gave Celebrations a loan out of their capital funds, for bleachers that they were able to pay back into the 3 years time period. This is their 10th anniversary as well.
I guess one of my big questions is there any way possible, or do we have any money, like what we can do that they did previously? I got the budget there, I was trying to see where it was at the end of the year, if there was something there. Where are we at, that we could possibly look at doing something like that out of capital, or somewhere.
You're saying instead of taking a loan?
Instead of taking a loan.
So what's the terms of the loan? 50,000 is the loan, but how much are we gonna end up paying back?
We don't know. Celebrations never approached Citizen Bank yet because we had no business, nobody had any business talking to them without board approval. I think they were looking for probably a 7 to 10 year note and hopes of paying it back in 2 to 3.
They've been very successful in the past about paying off their loans quickly, so it's been a positive situation.
And so this sign can be something that we can use if there's village events. I had also talked to them about possibly doing like movies in the park. I don't know if you guys saw that, but they were, like other places were renting these big things and putting on movies for people so that they could socially distance, that kind of thing. I know Steve has visions of doing music in the park, things like that, that we could use this for, that kind of thing. So there's a lot of different opportunities that we could use this for other than just the one event. But we had also talked about the possibility of renting it to other local areas, and that's something that we would have to get our attorneys involved with to make sure that we could put a contract together. Obviously, we can look at other contracts that are out there and kind of mimic something if we wanted to rent it to try to pay it back sooner.
We do have organizations interested in renting it already too.
What the lifespan on the sign is or something, is it projected?
This particular company is name branded Jumbotron. They're world leaders in large screen pictures. He showed me pictures of one that is sitting outside for 10 years in New Jersey. And it's fine, I mean, you know, the paint's faded on the trailer, the wood looks kind of junky. He's got other ones that, you know, stay indoors and they last, you know, virtually forever because they're not weathered. But those come with a plethora of spare, I'll call them panels. There's a bunch of square panels on there that make up the video screen, so if, God forbid, someone throw a bottle at it or, you know, a baseball hits it or something, you can replace them pretty quickly, cheaply.
And a warranty,
Yeah, it does have a warranty too.
and they'll trade.
I'll make the motion to allow the celebration committee to go look into the loan and purchase the sign.
I will second.
And just a question, who will own the sign?
The village.
Technically, the village owns it.
The village would buy it?
Well, yeah.
With the loan?
Right.
Yeah.
Taking on the
If
finance.
the village takes out a loan but doesn't own the item that's bought with it. See, one thing, I don't know that we've ever finalized the celebration ordinance or whatever, and, you know, we, right now, the relationship's kind of tenuous as to whether it's really part of the village. I mean, it's sort of, but it's not.
Well, it's part of
Well, we
DPW, because there is
settled
nothing.
this under, with the insurance company when we met with them a couple of months ago, and
Yeah,
we had cleared up with them that, you know, it was formed as a subsidiary of the DPW, and it never changed.
I mean, do we budget for them?
They have not yet. They're working on their own finance committee and their own budget to be submitted with this year's budget,
Okay,
or 2022's budget. And they will pay for it. There will be no taxpayer dollars involved in this. They just need the village's blessing to get the loan.
and I didn't remember, I'm sorry, with the bleachers, I just don't recall if we bought the bleachers. I thought the village might have bought the bleachers.
Correct.
And then,
Well, yeah, the bleacher
then-
money came from the village.
and then they paid the village
Right.
off.
Right.
I think that, well, I don't remember 100% if the village owned, you know, bought the bleachers. So here, yeah, I'd say if the idea is upon the purchase that technically title is in the village, because either they're a subcommittee of the village or
Right.
it is the village.
No, it wouldn't have to be titled as village property, just as a
No, I think that's-
front end loader or a fire truck.
Yeah, no, I think that's fine, because I just, again, I don't know that we got to the point of, like, within our code saying we have a celebrations committee as one of our, you know, committees, and who appoints them and decides. So,
So I have some concern of the perception that it is going to be looked at as taxpayer money. It's already out on Facebook groups that have been shared with me. I'm not on Facebook myself, but they've been shared with me with that exact thing of what gives celebrations the right to get something like this whenever we can't hardly make budget on other things or press forward with things like our water development, potable water development, our city sewer and other things like that. So I want to make sure that I understand this correctly, that celebrations will pay us back, but do we, and the village is going to take out this loan, so the perception is that we are going 50,000 more into debt with the anticipation that celebrations will pay us back. And we need to have a contract with celebrations stating that they will, who's going to pay for insurance, where this is going to be stored so that village property is going to be properly taken care of and properly housed. If it's commercial, if it's residential property, whatever the case might be, I'm just asking to protect ourselves so that we don't have people come in and ask those questions of why did we take on 50,000 more in debt when we don't have the money to play with.
Good question.
I guess we need
Celebrations-
that to do it, but
Right.
to advertise and everything else, I understand the purpose behind it, but
Celebrations has the money in their checking account to pay for this easily. They don't want to lay that money out cash now with the event coming up in July, Because there's a lot of costs involved going into the event that should it get rained out, you're still out that money. And they wouldn't have enough to pay their bills then in July.
Right.
They figure if they can take out a loan as their 10th anniversary and they can pay it back, and maybe they pay it back in August, who knows?
Well, that's fantastic, but if COVID-21 comes up and things continue to spiral downward, we can't, you know, whatever the case might be,
Right.
if it's rain, if it's God playing games with us still or whatever, you know, I wanna make sure that we're not gonna get on the hook for this, because technically, I've heard, we've had issues with with doing this type of thing in the past, and I'll use the sewer pipe laid underneath 164 for an example. Years and years ago, whenever that was put into the ground, it was anticipated that that money, which was taken out as a loan, was going to eventually get back and be paid back because of the development of a sewer. And here we are, 15 years later, and we still haven't been able to do it. We haven't seen a return on that investment. What's that?
It was like 7.
7, whatever it is, but we're out that amount of money. I just want something that's gonna guarantee us that we're going to get that money back and no taxpayer money is being vested.
That's what we had
into it.
talked about in the finance committee, and that's why, so knowing that they have the money in that committee, that they could pay it right now
Mhm.
and have it fully whatnot. We had also talked to them, making sure that they validate with insurance that it can be stored off premise. If it can't be stored off premise in a indoor location, they had talked about storing it behind DPW. I think that's something that we would have to bring back for discussion if our insurance says that we can't do that.
Okay.
And that's something that we had talked about in the finance meeting with them.
So is celebrations, what is it called, de facto or whatever, is it actually part of the village? Do we have control over their finances? Or could they opt, if they have no contract with the village, to just all of a sudden say, you know what, the pool company has decided that they're not gonna do their thing in Big Bend anymore, we have nothing else, we're being absolved, and congratulations, you guys own a $50,000 billboard.
You know, I think this is a great thing to have for celebrations. I'm all for it to get the sign, to help advertise. I think we can probably run it out, but I totally agree with Tony, we need to protect ourselves to say, we are taking out this loan for celebrations, a subcommittee of the village. And it is a subcommittee, and that's how they run some of their insurance underneath the village. And, you know, they're gonna take and pay it back in X amount of time for the amount of their loan plus the interest. And that way it truly shows that there's no tax dollars being spent. This subcommittee is basically taking out a sub-loan from us, and they make a promise to pay for it. And we can have John write up that contract. Is that acceptable to this?
Yes, and if I may make a comment, great point. We're gonna be doing more than just the poll. Our goal is to maybe have snowmobile races in 2022, plus doing some activities in the park. Anything that goes through our treasurer account has to come through the village. We have to fill out a form. It's signed by the president, over by Kelly, and I'm the president of the Rumble by the River, so I see what goes in and out. So it's not like we can write out our own checks and money to pay for wherever we wanna go, we can't do that.
So
This
from
is-
history, there's been issues where they've needed money on hand, and we have to have someone here to get that money for them.
Okay.
Like, they can't just go and spend because they don't have the means to do it.
Okay.
So we're held accountable, which we should be, to do that, but again, we also can't run these events without the support, you know, of the board, of the fire and police departments, and so on and so forth, so everybody on that committee is volunteer. The majority of them on the board do not even live in the village, but we believe in this event, and this year being the 10th year event, the reason we moved pullers is we're bringing in bigger trucks, bigger tractors, and we're expecting probably 6,000 to 10,000 people per night on a Friday and Saturday, along with all the other activities we have. I know these guys are gonna be busy with the heck about doing that, but, so we're expecting big time stuff here. Now, again, COVID, rain, yeah, we're at the mercy of God on this stuff.
6,000 to 10,000 people.
Yes, last year we had, well, 2 years ago, we had over 6 on Saturday.
Nice.
So, I mean, we're bringing more people than the village has here. And you talk to the businesses here, when the rumble's going on, business is up.
Sure.
From the gas stations, liquor stores,
And I'm-
bars, or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm definitely not trying to knock that
No,
down.
I
I'm just
understand.
wanting to make sure that the investment is properly.
Right. You're elected to represent the
Protected.
people that paid this, and I totally agree with that.
I believe you could structure the loan to have the payments withdrawn right out of Celebration's account. So it never comes across any taxpayer account.
I would believe
The
that.
Celebrations has their own private check stock up at Citizens, requires 2 signatures to write a check out of that account, hers and someone from Celebrations, either
Right.
Steve or Elena.
Mhm.
Um,
Just draft up an offer to purchase, you know, whatever the contract is.
Is there a reason why all 50,000 is coming from the loan and not some sort of hybrid? I know
That
you
50
don't-
might be high, and we just use that as a figure. Again, if we get rained out, I mean, we come in with the porta johns, with the food, with the bands, with the, our budget is about $7,000. And before we can even start the event up.
Right.
So we don't wanna say only we need 25, we lose 25, and then we have a rain out.
No,
So- yeah.
finance talked, I was just curious if people who were worried about a risk of 50,000
Right.
would feel maybe a little better with less risk, but
I mean, they've proven themselves with their track record of purchasing the bleachers. They've given a lot of money back to the village, from the event and things like that. So I mean, I think it's reasonable that, you know, is it a risk? Yes, but they have the money right now in that account. That if it fell through, like, they can pay it. And I think doing it how you suggested, where it doesn't even flow across a taxpayer account, is the best way to do it. Because it is not being paid by taxpayers. This is being paid by the events that
By our
this
sponsors.
team is paying on, our sponsors, everything like that. So,
That sponsor board too, Tony, I'm sorry if I'm out of line, Village President, but advertisers love that board. And part of when I go out and get sponsorship money, corporate sponsors, whatever, they love seeing their name go up there. And last year we took in, or 2 years ago, I'm sorry, took in, I don't know, about $30,000. I'm concerned this year because of COVID, businesses that have suffered. So we have teamed up with the Chamber of Commerce in Muskego and Mugwanago and held a function at the Lions Clubhouse here, what they call Business After 5, and we're gonna be picking up more sponsors outside of the village to help bring in more income.
Sure.
And that sign is a selling point for us.
Well, no doubt that sign, it caught my attention the first time I ever saw it.
going downhill.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, but, I mean, very good questions and concerns like we all have, so.
Just bringing it to the table. I love the discussion. Thank you, guys.
I think that should be all part of it, you know, that side contract. That they
is the
need.
account, village?
Yeah, it's Village of Big Bend Celebrations account.
Okay,
Says
so,
it.
and then that does give the village
Right.
control of
Right,
correct.
how fast it comes out for other things too, I guess, if there's
Right.
concern.
so we have a motion and a second.
Ton of discussion.
Plenty of discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm abstaining. Jeff? Mike made the motion. Jeff?
Thank you.
Oh, was it Michelle?
Mhm.
Thank you.
I'd just like you to come back with the details of the loan,
Sure.
okay?
Next finance meeting.
Yeah.
Item 7F, discussion, consideration, and possible action for approval of a purchase of a DPW camera. That should be by Celebrations. Chief enlightened me on this one. this came up in personnel and finance, and they decided to kick it down to celebrations, because celebrations had not approved it yet. Eric would like to put a camera and light behind the DPW fire station 2 to keep an eye on stuff back there now.
I will make a motion to send it to celebrations for consideration before it comes to the board.
I'll second that, but with DPW, with celebrations being a subcommittee of the DPW, you know, I've asked Eric that, you know, you should be there to give DPW a report of what's going on. So that it's all wrapped in with the parent part of DPW, and then DPW always comes and gives a report to the board.
Like tonight, yeah. Yeah, and I asked if I needed to be here prior to this thing. And yeah, I have no problem doing that. Okay, good. And along with our minutes too, our books are always open, so I mean, Kelly gets those, so anybody who has anything with that, again, we have nothing
I mean,
to.
we totally trust you, but
Right, no, I understand.
anytime you have anything connected like that, it should be done that way.
No,
So it's not just floating out there in the wind, and if somebody has a question, they can see it
got
in
it,
minutes and whatever.
no problem.
Thank you.
So I have a motion,
I had something.
motion and a second to kick it back down to celebrations. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. You catch me on that as abstaining. Thanks, Steve, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Item 7G, discussion, consideration, and possible action for approval of 2021 contract with Wisconsin Building Inspections LLP. We had this at Finance and Personnel, and we recommended to table it there pending review from the attorney. Because he hasn't had a chance to look over a contract. I know there's nothing major changed in there or anything, but
And we had one, I take it, similar in the factory?
yeah, it was a long time ago though, right, Jason?
Yeah, I guess 2012 was the last current one.
Before your time?
Yeah, well,
Okay, well, we'll take a look at
So,
So then does that change the date of the start? If they're gonna review it, we're not gonna see it again until March.
is there a start date on
That's
there?
on March
Yeah,
2021,
March 1st.
Yeah.
the first.
Can you start a contract retroactive?
it. Oh, sure. I
Yeah.
mean, you can, so.
Sure.
Fair enough.
I mean, it's not like we're gonna fire them.
Hey, maybe we want to take it back to where these all roll on January 1st or something.
I just worry about having to go through contract reviews while we're trying to do budget at the same time.
It should be actually done before.
It's nice to have stay.
Right. So, I would be looking for a motion.
I will make a motion to table.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7H, discussion, consideration, and possible action for approval of the 2021 contract with Mary Sensky to village planner. Personnel and Finance had the same opinion on this, to table it until the attorney could review that contract as well.
Do we have any verbiage in here related to the,
Billing?
billing? Not getting a whole year's worth of billing in there,
We did address it with her, but I don't believe it's in the contract.
I would seriously consider putting it in there as a section.
I think that's a good idea.
Under section 4, the contractor's billing shall indicate the date, description of services provided in the
Oh,
amount.
there's something, yeah,
Yeah, we could add it in right after that.
shall be monthly, yeah.
We had told her,
Monthly,
we
no
had
less than
requested
quarterly.
monthly, yes.
Parts of monthly, no later.
Well, in here, it just says the payment to the contractor is monthly, but it's not saying that we're
Right.
asking her to bill us
Right.
monthly. So we want that in there.
Right, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we owe her monthly, she owes us monthly.
Yep.
So I will make a motion to table, but we need to include, amend the contract to include her billing us for service to no more than quarterly,
No less than.
no less than quarterly.
Well, I suppose it depends how you're looking.
Yeah.
Got a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Who was the second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7I, discussion, consideration, and possible action for approval changing the police and fire department's vendor for phone services. And I guess that throws in DPW as well, as I was told earlier. Chief?
Fire Assistant Chief Sonnenberg, myself, met with representatives from FirstNet. For those of you who don't know what FirstNet is, it's a branch of AT&T, which is basically an emergency management type phone system. What it does is it gives you priority service at all times, when it's most critical, obviously, with us working on an emergency management plan for the village. If there's a critical incident and everybody's on their phone sending text to their loved one, dialing and everything else, it pushes us, it automatically pushes us to the top as emergency services. It includes both the fire department, DPW, or all of us, the DPW, firefighters, and police. You guys might be on, I don't know if you guys are.
We are. Canadian Pacific is.
So that, and I didn't even know that one. The feds the FBI just went to it nationwide, obviously, because in the beginning, they did have some kinks in it, but their system, they got all those kinks out of it, from my understanding of it, talking to these vendors. Everything from fire chief, he can jump in whenever he wants. The budget that we have already set for 2021 would still be within budget based on Eric's budget for his phone and my budget for my phones, and the Cradle Points, which the Cradle Points, if you don't know, are what runs our computers in our squad and sends us all our data back and forth. The fire department would be going to Cradle Points for their rigs and their ambulances versus the hotspots that they have now, which my opinion of hotspots is very low. Computer geeks in here probably will agree with me. So we're asking, the only thing that we're going to do is, when we talked to Waukesha County Communications, they asked that we get a 1 month temporary one for the Cradle Point to make sure there's no dead spots in the village. We've fought that since I've been here up until last year. The last year we've been pretty good with it, the Verizon one. So we want to make sure that there's no dead spots. Jamie Sonnenberg, as you know, is a Waukesha County deputy for the last 25 years. They just went to FirstNet. He has a FirstNet phone. He has had no problems with his FirstNet phone that he's got from the county. As far as he knows, there's no problem with the squads that are down here with Cradle Point. So that's a good sign. So what I'm at, I'll check with 9105, the day shift squad is on the southeast of the county, to see what their opinion is of it, just to make sure everything's hunky-dory, because obviously Jamie doesn't work down here at 9105 very often, or very seldom, I should say. So I'm asking to be allowed to make me and the fire department, and obviously Eric, the one question Eric had was, well, when he's up north in the summertime, that the FirstNet would work in Mercer. I got an email back from from FirstNet. It works in Mercer. It's only west of Mercer near the National Forest that it doesn't work, but if you're near any National Forest, your phone service for your cell phones usually is not very well. So we would still stay under budget. The fire department stated earlier that they'd be staying under budget. So we're just looking for the okay to look into it. If everything works out right, based on our new emergency management, based on the success of FirstNet, we'd like to go to that phone system versus Verizon if everything checks out in this next 6 weeks or 8 weeks. Well, we do a test once we get the equipment.
What's your opinion, Joey?
The only difference that I can tell is the fact that when we're running a crowdsourced area, like the first time I noticed it was whenever I was at a concert at Alpine Valley. Normally, you have your cell phone, you can't get any reception or calls in and out or anything, because there's so much of a crowd and everybody's sucking up the juice, if you will, and I had full bars and it actually prioritized my phone over everybody else.
Yeah, you're right.
Which was crazy.
Yeah.
Otherwise it operates just like AT&T.
Priority bandwidth. Yeah, I know fire department chief said earlier that their hotspots versus these cradles.
Cradle points.
Yeah, the hotspots were almost double what, almost quadruple, I think he said, right?
I believe so, yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're gonna save a ton of money
Yeah.
with those mobile hotspots, so I think it's a win-win.
What Jamie was talking about was, because right now, because of the amount, when they look at the data that the fire department uses, they can go on a lower plan that will save them money. Like for our squad, with our amount of data, we need to go to, stay with the unlimited, which will be the same, or a penny more cradle point per month. But for the fire department, they'll actually, because of what their trend is for their data, they can go on a lower plan, which saves them even more money. And I think it was almost half the cost, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, and I wasn't able to attend that meeting, I just know what Jamie had
Yeah.
told me from that, so.
Because they have special rates for law enforcement, fire departments, correct? I mean, it's below what the normal rate is for, street value rates, so that's even better too.
So have we looked at a contract on this or anything, or?
There's no contract, you can get in and out whenever you want.
So it's just a verbal commitment then?
Well, you gotta
You gotta get,
write, you apply for it and they start billing you and you gotta have everything, but it's not like a 2-year contract with you, like AT&T and some of these phone companies you have. Or if you leave in the first 2 years, you gotta pay $750 or whatever the stupid stuff used to be. It's just
It's tailored towards first response.
Is there a buyout of our current contract?
no, I'll double check that, but no, we're month to month for that too.
I was gonna ask if this is gonna require new equipment for everybody as well.
That includes the phones, and well, that includes everything, it'll still stay under budget. And there's some rebates for the new phones that was scheduled to be bought this year anyhow for the police department. So that, and with the rebate, it'll offset it.
Perfect.
And and right now, what Jamie was talking about earlier, finance, there's a special on the cradle points, so they're a little cheaper. That's probably the biggest cost, is the cradle points, so they're a little expensive, but not crazy. We'll still maintain our budget between, between Eric and my phone budget and internet budget, it's $3,000, we'll still stay under that $3,000.
Finance made the recommendation earlier tonight to approve, and I will make that motion at the board level, that we approve the change for personnel.
I'll second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate you guys sticking around, drive safely. Item 8, correspondence. Any correspondence? No correspondence. Item 9, public comments. We have no public. Item 10,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
all in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned.
Yeah,
Kelly? That, shows that you copied off for the collision report, it's actually the front page, it's the second page. that we
Oh,
need.
you needed the second page, not
Yeah.
the front. I'll get that for you.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're good.
These are shorter than plan commission.
well done meeting.
These meetings are shorter than
Yeah.
plan commission.
Usually,
Usually.
Because, I was using Charlie Journal, you all know Charlie Journal. Yes, so what I ended up doing is I was going to
So I'll see you on the, see how the middle of, the frozen.
Night, everybody.
So,
If I do, it's gonna be a go out,
Yeah.
donate some money, drop some money in the raffles and get out.
because I was.
Dude, if you need me to go work on my couch, so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go over and check at 20 at Wolski's door and tell him that throw in some raffle baskets.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be crazy.
So
So you'll get those correct.
I will.
The diehards, they're gonna be having, they got